It's no longer a rumor that Hernando County Sheriff Al Nienhuis will have a challenger in the upcoming election. So we sat down with his opponent, former NYPD officer Joe Puglia, to find out what motivated his decision to jump into the race and learn a little more about what he would do differently than the incumbent.
I became a New York City cop when I was 20 years old. Worked on patrol. From there, I went on into the aviation unit. I've been flying since I'm 14 years old and got my private pilot's license and continued on getting my commercial pilot and flight instructor and so on. Then I had a great opportunity to become a helicopter pilot for the NYPD, and it was just the right time, and that's exactly what I did.
So after the NYPD, you spent some time there. What did you decide to do after that?
I got hired at United Airlines as a commercial pilot. Started off as a first officer on the 737 based in Los Angeles. Lateral back across the country, and then finally ended up flying captain, type rated on the 737, 757, and the 767.
And then you came down to Florida. What year did you come to Florida?
Well, I started coming here in about 1991 because my mother-in-law built a house here in Spring Hill. In 1999, I moved here. I left the NYPD in 1992 and got hired at United Airlines as a commercial pilot.
So you have your law enforcement experience, but then you picked up some big management experience, right?
I did, yeah. While I was at United Airlines, I got into management. I was the new pilot supervisor based in Chicago. And at the Chicago hub, we had 800 new hires that I was responsible for. And my duties and responsibilities took them through probation until they were fully checked out and flying the line. So that was tremendous experience for me. I got to do a lot of work with human resources, different labor laws, contracts with the Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, contract interpretation to keep them in line with what the rules were for the company.
Were you still with United when you moved to Florida?
I was. I moved here in 1999. Like I said earlier, we've been coming here since 1991. And then when I got on with United, leaving the NYPD, I no longer had to live in New York, so I decided, hey, let's move to Florida because we knew Hernando County, it was great. And of course, it was just about half the population that we have now.
So didn't you spend some time at the Newport Richey Police Department?
I did, yes. I was the law enforcement officer for the Newport Richey Police Department on patrol. My duties were primarily assigned to Sims Park, which I enjoyed thoroughly. I like working with people. I like being out there and being a deterrent and serving the needs of the public.
Talk to me a little bit about, what prompted you? What made you decide you wanted to run for sheriff in Hernando County?
Well, that's a little bit tough. I've always had tremendous admiration for the sheriff and this agency in particular. We've been here a long time. My son was hired here, and of course we were very proud of him when he was hired in July of 2020. And then he had some issues in the agency, and when it came to my attention, obviously understanding law enforcement, especially with training, I was a bit surprised as to the lack of attention to detail in record keeping with training, especially people during their probationary period, which of course led him to file a lawsuit. But that's what sparked my interest and got me starting to think about, gee, I know that I could do a better job than what they were doing at the time.
And I'm sure over the course of that lawsuit, you probably discovered a lot of things that even reinforced your thought of taking this job.
Yes, there were. It was actually a little bit disappointing, being a law enforcement officer myself, to see what was being done to him. And as time went on, it became apparent to me from other people reaching out that it was going on to other deputies, and that translates into wasted money.
Yeah.
To train a deputy and put them out on the road probably cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000. When you look at the amount of people and turnover that exist at the agency because they go to work somewhere else, on the numbers that I came up with, you're looking at almost $8 million. And that's a heavy hit to the taxpayer.
Right.
When you're in your own business, you understand that pain.
So now that you've jumped into the race and you are an official opponent against Sheriff Nienhuis, the incumbent, what are some of the things that you think you could do better than he has over the last several years?
Well, for one, retention of employees. You have to understand that you have to treat people the way you expect to be treated. They have to feel good about coming to work every day, which means a good compensation package, and understanding that they're not coming to work in an institution where somebody is looking to constantly hem them up. That may or may not be the case, but it is the perception that the men and women of this agency have today. And with my background, that's not going to be the case. I know what it is to sit in a radio car and do what they do. And I know what it is to have to answer to supervisors and bosses and the stress that puts on an already stressful job. That's going to go away the day that I take over. We'll have a job to do in servicing the community and dealing with the issues that we face today, but we're going to do it professionally. We're going to do it in accordance with the law, and we're going to do it in accordance with policy and what's constitutionally sound. That's how we're going to operate.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked that question. Is he going to follow the Constitution?
Absolutely. Because if we don't follow the Constitution, what's left?
A few years ago, there was a homicide that happened where a young woman was murdered in her own home allegedly by her boyfriend. Now this is really, like I said, I got a lot of people very angry because apparently the sheriff's office wasn't able to find enough means to make an arrest, according to them. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you think about that case, if you can.
This one, it hits home being a father. My cousin was the victim of an unsolved homicide, and when I became a sworn New York City cop, I had gone to the detectives and asked them, where were we at? Can I look at the case? And when I looked at that file, I could not even tell my aunt what was in it because it was tough. To this day, nobody has been arrested in that case. So I understand. I can't relate, but I understand because the pain must be immense. That case in particular needs to be looked at with a fresh set of eyes. I'm not sure what transpired, but it appears to me that something went wrong during the course of the investigation. I might be wrong. But it certainly warrants us taking a look at it, and I certainly intend to do that.
And I think that's what Eddie and Judy, that's all they're asking for. They feel like they were mistreated, and I'm sure when you go through something like that, it's not easy. Even the people trying to help you, I'm sure it's tough to deal with them. You want answers right away. You're willing to put another set of eyes on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about the Constitution earlier, and that applies to everybody. The good guys and the bad guys. Was the investigation thorough? Were there any mistakes? And I'm not saying that any of the detectives that were on the scene that day made mistakes. I'm not saying that at all. But it certainly does warrant a fresh look with a fresh set of eyes. The family deserves that, and we're certainly going to deliver that.
During budget time, he addresses the Hernando Board of County Commissioners and requests, to approve his budget, his annual budget. And each year he asks for a substantial increase to that budget. The reasoning behind that, he says, is because he wants to add more boots on the ground. But according to what the research we've done, it looks like that year after year he gets the increases, but there doesn't seem to be the number of deputies doesn't seem to be going up.
That goes back to retention. Okay. If you're not happy going to work, if you can make a lot more money working somewhere else, you're going to go. That's human nature. And who suffers is the taxpayer. Look, we've got a lot of issues we're facing here. I've been here a long time. The crime is going up. They can sugarcoat it any way they want, but crime is going up. And unless you have the manpower to address those issues, you will always be a reactive agency. You're not going to be a proactive agency. So you have to stop the people from leaving. They have to feel good about coming here to work. You have to support them and give them the tools and the compensation necessary to do the job effectively.
And you think that morale may be
Morale
a
is
component
definitely
as well?
morale is definitely an issue. 100%. 100% morale is an issue, and there are a lot of things that you can do to change the morale. Look, I don't want to be at the top of that organizational chart. I want to sit at the bottom with my administration and support the men and women above us. We're here to get things done for you, ultimately the community, to deliver the service that the taxpayer deserves. That's it in a nutshell. Whether you're flying an airliner or giving the service of law enforcement, it is the same concept.
I'm not going to ask you to be specific, but do you believe there's some bad apples in the administration?
That's hard to say. Do I think there's some inattentive apples? Absolutely. I would like to think that we don't have bad people. I'm going to be the guy who turns the agency around where the public trusts the police. And it's not fair to the men and women in the agency that go out there and respond to the jobs after job that they're not feeling that the community is behind them.
Transparency has seemed to just vanished.
Anything that we could publicly disclose without compromising an investigation will be publicly disclosed to you. We'll take the cameras, for instance, the flock system. Under Chapter 30 of the Florida statute, it's within the sheriff's right to spend the money which he sees, the way he sees fit. But you have to have the trust of the community you're serving. I think that should have been put out publicly. We're not going to tell you the fruits of the investigation or what's under investigation, but the public has a right to know, especially when you have an investor in this company that has connections to China with data mining. Look at where we're at today. I'm not saying it has anything to do with, but it's strange that suddenly we find ourselves in a position where you can't go to the tax collector.
So Joe, some of the problems that have been going on, according to a lot of people who've reached out to us, have said that there's some fraternization going on that maybe shouldn't be, or at least going overboard, that's causing a lot of people to be uncomfortable within the agency. A lot of complaints have been filed. People have left because of it. And some have said that they've even been forced out of the agency because of certain issues. So what would be your policy? Would you make a change? How would you approach that?
Look, I happen to be familiar with their policy because of what transpired in the past with my son's lawsuit. The policy stands on its own. The policy should be adhered to, and the policy should be enforced the way it is stipulated as it is. They have a policy to deal with that. But Tom, here's the thing. You're not going to get people to not interact, not fall in love, whatever the case may be. I would expect that you are professional enough to not make it a condition of employment. So nobody should feel uncomfortable. What you do at your home is certainly your business. And I will not pass judgment on that. But you have an obligation to provide a healthy work environment for the rest of your employees. So please, when you come to work, leave that at the door.
So you want to be more, if you were elected, you would be more of a hands-on sheriff, right? You're not just going to sit behind a desk all day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would expect that the men and women in this agency will know me personally. If I'm out, or any of my administration is out and they're falling behind in jobs, I have no problem getting on the radio and starting to pick up jobs to help them out. I don't plan on sitting behind a desk all day long, being a bean counter. We're going to share the responsibility and to deliver the service that the taxpayers need.
You talked about this before, crime, whether they want to admit it or not, crime is more prevalent, it seems like. Drugs, gangs, violence. What kind of proactive things, if that is your goal, is to be more proactive?
Look, you need manpower. And it goes back to the issue of they have to be happy coming to work. You need to retain those employees. There needs to be a progression from a patrol deputy to a street crime unit up into detective, where they're compensated justly, and meaningful compensation, because that's important. They have to be able to meet their obligations as well. The manpower, when you get the numbers to where they should be, now it gives you flexibility to respond to these issues. Believe me, the bad guys know where the vulnerabilities lie, and they're going to exploit that. But I want them to know, if you come to Hernando County and commit crime and sell drugs to our kids and give us all sorts of social problems as a result of that, you're going to spend some time here. And then you're going to go on to the state. Don't come to Hernando County to create problems, because it's going to cost you. They need to know that we're serious about it, and you will be dealt with.
They're going to be putting a referendum on the ballot this November for a 1-cent sales tax increase to pay for what could be $350 million of taxpayer money to rebuild everything that Sheriff Nienhuis is asking for. What would you do if you were in that position? You know that things need to be fixed. Maybe there are some legitimate needs here. Sure. How would you approach it? Would you just be like, give me everything?
No. Look, when you go to the people today and tell them, I'm going to take more of your money on top of them trying to pay an electric bill or buy medication or send their kid to school, this is the wrong time to do that. I'm not saying they're completely wrong in their assessment, but it's the wrong time to do it. My approach is this: we need boots on the ground to stop the crime. We'll find other ways to deal with space. I was at the Board of County Commission meeting, and I watched Major Lakin make his presentation to the commissioners. This was spawned between a conversation between Colonel Hayden and another gentleman in the county who said, oh, you don't have any room. We need to do grand scheme of things. And they ran with it. It's the wrong time. It's not the right time to spend that kind of money. We have other bigger issues that we need to deal with. And again, that's going to be boots on the ground. And the men and women in this agency need to be taken care of so they can deliver the service. Fair compensation, good work rules, where they're respected, and the tools to do their job.
So speaking of tools, one of the things people have been calling for in this county over and over, and it just seems like no one is listening, they are demanding that our deputies wear body cameras.
I'm for them. We will have them. And I'll convince the men and women who are not convinced in the agency that this is a good thing. But here's what I ask, and most of them do this every day. Do your job professionally. Do it in accordance with the law and the policy. And you have my word. I will back you up if it costs me the next election. Because I'll go back to doing what I'm doing. If you don't like me or I don't support you, vote me out.
And I think that's going to make a lot of people happy to hear you say that.
But I believe it. I sincerely believe it. I don't think you can sit down at night and watch TV and not see a extremely violent act committed on a law enforcement officer, and then they get judged by what happened, where somebody gets to drink a cup of coffee and watch things frame by frame and pass judgment on them. It's a great tool. It'll keep them honest. It'll stop the complaints. And by the way, it's a violation of law if you make a false complaint against a law enforcement officer. And if you come in and make a complaint that is not valid, in other words, you're lying, I intend to go after you for it. We're not going to accept that.
Okay. So there'll be consequences, and now you'll have the means to say black and white.
Absolutely.
You did it or you didn't, or
Yeah,
whatever.
and by all means, if you have a valid complaint, we'll investigate it. Come forward. So my vision is this. We're lucky enough, I'll give them kudos, they got an academy off the ground. We intend to make that academy better. Those body cameras will be worn by deputies in training the whole time they're there. So when they get out, it's second nature. They already know. Look, law enforcement at some times could be very disturbing to watch. And there's foul language that comes out. Your adrenaline is going. You're afraid. I'm not going to be holding people accountable for using foul language in the heat of the moment. We could discuss that later, but you don't have to worry about that.
I think people do understand that people are human, and most people don't know the stress that a law enforcement officer goes through when they're approaching a scene that may be the last one they go to.
Yeah,
right?
you know, even in aviation, it's the same thing. You make a decision, you'll never know if you saved what we call in the industry a hull loss. If I went 10 degrees to the left around a thunderstorm, I don't know if I prevented this airplane from meeting its demise. A law enforcement officer, and there were times where I sat in a radio car responding to a call and had to consciously tell myself, slow down, you can lose your life.
So, Joe, in closing, what do you bring to Hernando County that you think is going to be the biggest benefit to protecting citizens, protecting their rights, protecting your deputies?
I certainly have my ear to the ground, being in law enforcement and not leaving not too long ago. And we have some pretty serious characters, some pretty new characters here, running drugs, criminal gangs that are certainly organized crime. As I said earlier, if you come to Hernando County to make victims out of our citizens, you're not going to leave. You're not going to leave. You're going to jail.
Do you, as Grady Judd does, encourage people to use their Second Amendment right to protect their homes?
Absolutely. Look, I've seen some of the comments posted. You're a New York City cop. Don't bring your liberal ways of thinking here and so on. Look, I firmly believe in your right to protect yourself and your family. I support the Second Amendment. I support the First Amendment. You're not going to have any issues with us. The stand your ground law. You have a right to protect yourself, and I'm behind that 100%.